Hello dear students, welcome back to another session of history. Today we are on second semester. The chapter is 7, Ashoka the emperor who gave up war. Now in this chapter we are going to learn about why Ashoka gave up the war. What was the reason behind for giving up the war and what are the things he has done for the welfare of the people. Now let's begin. Roshan's rupees. Roshan clutched the crisp notes that her grandfather had given her on her birthday. While she badly wanted to buy a new CD, she also wanted to just see and feel the brand new notes. It was then that she noticed that all of them had a smiling face of Gandhiji printed on the right and a tiny set of lions on the left. What were the lions there for? She wondered. So what was the lions were there on the notes? So she was wondering what is the reason behind we see the lion's picture on the notes, on the rupees. Now a very big kingdom is equal to an empire. The lions that we see on our notes and coins have a long history. They were carved in stone and placed on top of a massive stone pillar at Sarnath, about which you read in chapter 6. Now, this is a lion capital. How many lions are there? There are 4 lions and one is hidden. Then it is also known as the national emblem of our country, India. Now this also has a long story behind why we see the notes, why we see the picture on our currency notes. Ashoka was one of the greatest rulers known to history. Ashoka was one of the greatest rulers known to history, and on his instructions, inscriptions were inscribed on pillars. What is inscription? It is a words written in front of a book or cut in a stone or metal. Okay, inscription. Last class we read about what are inscriptions. It is a written format which we get on the stone, on a hard substance like on stones or on metals. Before we find out what was written in this inscription, let us see why his kingdom was called an empire. The empire that Ashoka ruled was founded by his grandfather Chandragupta Maurya. So who was the founder of the empire? It was founded by Ashoka's grandfather Chandragupta Maurya. More than 2300 years ago, Chandragupta was supported by a wise man named Chanakya or Kautilya. So Chandragupta Maurya founded an empire more than 2000 years ago, and he was supported by the wise man known as Chanakya or Kautilya. Many of Chanakya's ideas were written down in a book called the Arthashastra. Now what is Arthashastra? It is a book that is written about the administration, what are the rules and who will look after the empire. A book was written by the Chanakya. Now dynasty, when members of the same family become rulers one after another, the family is often called a dynasty. The Maurya were a dynasty with 3 important rulers: Chandragupta, his son Bindusara, and Bindusara's son Ashoka. So they were followed not followed by this, but Chandragupta followed by his son Bindusara and Bindusara's sons Ashoka. They had created the dynasty. It means the rulers who belong from the same family is known as the dynasty. The places where inscriptions of Ashoka has been found are marked with red dots. These were included within the empire. Name the countries where Ashokan inscriptions have been found. Which Indian states were outside the empire? So the inscriptions are marked with red dots. These are the inscriptions which are marked in the red dots. Okay, now you have to name the countries where Ashoka inscriptions have been found. One we can see in India, next we can see in the place of Afghanistan, Pakistan. Now same likewise you have also to find out the Indian states which were outside the empire, the Indian states which were outside the empires. Now there were several cities in the empire marked with black dots on the map. There are several cities in the empire marked with black dots on the map. This includes the capital Pataliputra, Taxila and Ujjain. Taxila was a gateway to the northwest, including Central Asia, while Ujjain lay on the route from north to south India. Merchants, officials and craftspersons probably lived in these cities. Now, the cities which are marked with the black dots, they are Taxila, then we have Ujjain, then Pataliputra. Any other cities you can see with the black dots? No, these are only the cities, 3 cities. Now merchants, the officials and craftspersons probably lived in these cities. Okay, the merchants, the traders, the officials and the craftspersons, they lived in this Taxila, Ujjain and Pataliputra. Pataliputra now it is known as Patna. In other areas there were villages of farmers and herders. In some areas such as central India, these were forests where people gathered forest produce and hunted animals for food. People in different parts of the empire spoke different languages. They probably ate different kinds of food and wore different kinds of clothes as well. Now, how are empires different from kingdoms? Now, empire, we know that a group of countries or states that are controlled by a ruler or government, that is known as an empire. Now, what is kingdom? A kingdom means a country ruled by a king or queen is known as a kingdom. Now, how we have to find the difference between empire from the kingdom? Emperors need more resources than kings because empires are larger than kingdoms and need to be protected by big armies. Empire, we know that it is a group of countries or states which are controlled by the ruler or government. Now, for this reason, the empires, they need the resources in order to run the empire, in order to run the country or the states. So also they need a larger number of officials who collect taxes. Now, ruling the empire. As the empire was so large, different parts were ruled differently. The area around Pataliputra was under the direct control of the emperor. This means that officials were appointed to collect taxes from farmers, herders, craftspersons and traders who lived in villages and towns in the area. Officials also punished those who disobeyed the ruler's orders. Many of these officials were given salaries. Messengers went to and fro, and spies kept a watch on the officials. And of course, the emperor supervised them all with the help of the members of the royal family and senior ministers. There were other areas of provisions. Each of these were ruled from a provisional capital such as Taxila or Ujjain. Although there was some amount of control from Pataliputra, and royal princes were often sent as governors, local customs and rules were probably followed. Besides, there were vast areas between these centers. Here, the Mauryas tried to control roads and rivers, which were important for transport, and to collect whatever resources were available as tax and tribute. For example, the Arthashastra tells us that the northwest was important for blankets and South India for its gold and precious stones. Now, who has written the Arthashastra? It was written by Chanakya. And Arthashastra means about the administration. It is possible that these resources were controlled as tribute. Now, tribute, unlike taxes which were collected on a regular basis, tribute was collected as and when it was possible from people who gave a variety of things more or less willingly. There were also the forested regions. People living in these areas were more or less independent, but may have been expected to provide elephants, timber, honey, and wax to Mauryan officials. Now, the emperor and the capital city. Megasthenes was an ambassador who was sent to the court of Chandragupta by the Greek ruler of West Asia named Seleucus Nicator. Megasthenes wrote an account about what he saw. Here is a part of his description. The occasions on which the emperor appeared in public are celebrated with grand royal processions. He is carried in a golden palanquin, and then his guards ride elephants decorated with gold and silver. Some of the guards carry trees on which live birds, including a flock of trained parrots, circle about the head of the emperor. The king is normally surrounded by armed women. He is afraid that someone may try to kill him. He has special servants to taste the food before he eats. He never sleeps in the same bedroom for 2 nights. And about Pataliputra, modern Patna, he wrote, "This is a large and beautiful city. It is surrounded by a massive wall. It has 570 towers and 64 gates. The houses of 2 and 3 stories are built of wood and mud brick. The king's palace is also of wood and decorated with stone carvings. It is surrounded with gardens and enclosures for keeping birds." So Megasthenes, his observation from this emperors is he has written his descriptions after he has observed. Now, why do you think the king had special servants to taste the food he ate? In what ways was Pataliputra different from Mohenjo-daro? In chapter number 3, we have read about Pataliputra and Mohenjo-daro. Now, we have to find out in what ways they are different from each other. Now, Ashoka, a unique ruler. The most famous Mauryan ruler was Ashoka. He was the first ruler who tried to take his message to the people through inscriptions. Most of Ashoka's inscriptions were in Prakrit. Prakrit means an ordinary language. And we also saw in the last chapter that Buddha he used Prakrit language in order to deliver the message to the people, and were written in the Brahmin script. So Ashoka, he was one of the most famous ruler of the Chandragupta Maurya Empire. Then he was also the first ruler who tried to give messages to the people through inscriptions, and most of his inscriptions were used in Prakrit language and also written in the Brahmin script. Now, Brahmin script means an old script written by the ancient rulers. Ashoka's war in Kalinga. Kalinga is the ancient name of coastal Odisha. Ashoka fought a war to conquer Kalinga. However, he was so horrified when he saw the violence and bloodshed that he decided not to fight any wars. He is the only king in the history of the world who gave up conquest after winning a war. Ashoka's inscriptions describing the Kalinga War. That is what Ashoka declared in one of his inscriptions. 8 years after becoming king, one conquered Kalinga. About 1.5 lakh people were captured, and more than 1 lakh of people were killed. This filled me with sorrow. Why? Whenever an independent land is conquered, lakhs of people die, and many are taken prisoners. Brahmins and monks also die. People who were kind to their relatives and friends, to their slaves and servants die, or lost their loved ones. That is why I am sad and have decided to observe Dhamma and to teach others about it as well. Now, what is Dhamma? Dhamma means Ashoka's ideas. I believe that winning people over through Dhamma is much better than conquering them through force. He thought that if he uses Dhamma, the ideas, it is much better than winning a war where many people loses their lives. I am inscribing this message for the future so that my son and grandson after me should not think about war. Instead, they should try to think about how to spread Dhamma. Now, Dhamma is a Prakrit word for the Sanskrit term Dharma. What was Ashoka's Dhamma? Means what was Ashoka's ideas? Ashoka's Dhamma did not involve worship of a god or performance of a sacrifice. He felt that just as a father tries to teach his children, he had a duty to instruct his subjects. He was also inspired by the teachings of the Buddha, which we have read in chapter number 6. There were a number of problems that troubled him. People in the empire followed different religions, and this sometimes led to conflict. Animals were sacrificed. Slaves and servants were ill-treated. Besides, there were quarrels in families and amongst neighbors. Ashoka felt it was his duty to solve these problems. So he appointed officials known as the Dhamma Mahatma who went from place to place teaching people about Dhamma. Besides, Ashoka got his messages inscribed on rocks and pillars, instructing his officials to read his message to those who could not read it themselves. Ashoka also sent messengers to spread ideas about Dhamma to other lands such as Syria, Egypt, Greece, and Sri Lanka. He built roads, dug wells, and built rest houses. Besides, he arranged for medical treatment for both human beings and animals. Now, the Rampurva bull. Look at the finely polished stone sculpture. This was part of a Mauryan pillar found in Rampurva, Bihar, and has now been placed in Rashtrapati Bhavan. It is an example of the skill of the sculptors of the time. This is a Rampurva bull. Now, Ashoka's message to his subjects. He was talking about the subjects here. So, what is his message? People perform a variety of rituals when they fall ill, when their children get married, when their children are born, or when they go on a journey. These rituals are not useful. If instead people observe other practices, this would be more fruitful. What are these other practices? These are being gentle with slaves and servants, respecting one's elders, treating all creatures with compassion, giving gifts to Brahmins and monks. It is both wrong to praise one's own religion or criticize another's. Each one should respect the other's religion. If one praises one's own religion while criticizing another's, one is actually doing greater harm to one's own religion. Therefore, one should try to understand the main ideas of another's religion and respect it. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, wrote, his edicts, instructions still speak to us in a language we can understand, and we can still learn much more from them. Identify the parts of Ashoka's message that you think are relevant today. So from his message, you have to find out what are the messages are still existing in our present in our country. About the religion also we can see in the fundamental rights that we are not supposed to criticize the religion of others, isn't it? There are many things which we can see in our Indian constitutions, the laws and the regulations being adapted from the message of Ashoka. Now, early Brahmin, Devangiri, Bengali, Malayalam, Tamil. Below the Brahmin script, most modern Indian scripts have developed from the Brahmin script over 100 of years. Hence, you can see the letter A written in different scripts. These are the Brahmin script. This is the letter A, okay, in a different language. This is the early Brahmin who wrote the scripts, letter A. Then Devangiri means Hindi. This is the letter. Bengali, this is the letter. Malayalam, this is the letter. And Tamil, this is the letter of A. Now elsewhere, somewhat before the time of the Mauryan Empire, about 2400 years ago, emperors in China began building the Great Wall. It was meant to protect the northern frontier of the empire from pastoral people. Additions to the wall were made over a period of 2000 years because the frontiers of the empire kept shifting. The wall is about 6,400 km long and is made of stone and brick with a road along the top. Several thousand people worked to build the wall. There are watch towers all along at a distance of about 100 to 200 meters. Now this was about the chapter Ashoka, the emperor who gave up war. So we understood from this chapter that why Ashoka, the emperor, gave up the emperor gave up the war, and what are the messages he has given to the people. Now next time we will meet with a new topic. Till then, students, take care of yourself and thank you so much.